After her husband was blinded saving her, Vanessa Cole thought the world had handed her a burden instead of a blessing. The headlines called Ethan a hero, but to her he was a reminder of everything she didn't want. Weakness, scars, darkness. So when she demanded a divorce to marry his boss, the same man who once toasted their love at company dinners, everyone whispered she'd lost her soul. But behind Ethan's calm voice and dark glasses, something dangerous was waking. Something that remembered every lie, every touch, every betrayal she thought he'd never see. How does a man who lost his sight see clearer than everyone around him? And when a wife trades love for luxury, what kind of justice waits for her in the dark? The night the fire broke out, the Dallas skyline glittered behind their penthouse glass like a promise Ethan Cole once believed in. He'd worked 12-hour days designing an optical sensor for Bennett Tech's defense division, a project he believed would change the world. But that night, it wasn't work he was thinking about. It was his wife. Vanessa stood by the mirror, silk robe untied, scrolling through her phone with a smile she hadn't given him in months. Her voice, sweet and detached, murmured, "Good night, Richard," before she dropped the call and turned just enough to catch Ethan's reflection behind her. "Who was that?" he asked softly. "No one you know," she said, already walking away. "You wouldn't understand." The gas hiss from the kitchen broke the air before Ethan could answer. He turned. The light flickered. Then, boom, the world tore open in fire. The blast threw him across the marble floor. Heat clawed at his skin. He couldn't see her, only hear her scream, trapped by the fallen beam near the kitchen counter. His mind didn't think. His body just moved. He crawled through glass and flame, pulled her out, shielded her with his own body as the ceiling collapsed behind them. When the firefighters dragged them out, Vanessa was untouched, save for a few scratches. Ethan, the man who had saved her life, opened his eyes to nothing but darkness. The first week in the hospital was filled with silence. Doctors said there was hope for partial recovery, but Vanessa never stayed long enough to hear it. She always left early, smelling of expensive perfume, whispering, "I have meetings." Grace McCall, Ethan's assistant, was the only one who sat by his bed. She held his hand, read his emails, told him about the prototype deal that was finally being reviewed. "You did it," she said quietly, voice trembling. "Your design passed the board." Ethan smiled faintly. "Tell Vanessa," he murmured. Grace hesitated. "She already knows." That night when Vanessa finally arrived, she didn't sit down. She stood at the edge of the bed, diamond earrings catching the fluorescent light. "Ethan," she said softly, "we need to talk." He turned toward the sound of her voice. "Talk about what?" "Us," she said. "I can't do this. I can't live like this. Nursing a blind man, watching everything fall apart." He tried to steady his breathing. "Vanessa, I saved your life." She exhaled sharply like his words were an inconvenience. "And I'm grateful, but gratitude isn't love. Richard understands me. He can give me the life I deserve." The sound of that name again. Richard Bennett, his boss, his mentor. The silence that followed was heavier than the hospital air. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" Ethan asked. She nodded. The clink of her bracelet was the only sound. "I already filed." That night when the nurse dimmed the lights, Grace found Ethan sitting up, staring into the dark he could not see. His voice was calm. "She said Richard can give her the life she deserves." Grace hesitated. "What are you going to do?" He turned his head slowly toward her voice. "See everything, even without eyes." Months before the fire, Ethan had been reviewing legal files with his lawyer, Michael Hurst. "If I register the prototype under a shell LLC," Ethan said, "can Vanessa or the company touch it?" Michael smiled. "Not unless they find the real owner behind the layers." "Why?" Ethan's eyes had flicked to his wife across the room, laughing on a call. "Because sometimes protection isn't about what you see, it's about what they never know." One night at Bennett Tech's gala, Richard Bennett leaned close to Vanessa. "You're wasted on him, Vanessa," he whispered. "A man who buries himself in code and circuits doesn't understand power." "I do," she'd smiled. "Then teach me." When Ethan returned home, Vanessa's things were gone. Only her perfume lingered, sharp, cold, unforgettable. The divorce papers sat on the marble counter beside the key card she'd once used to enter his lab. She'd left him a note. "You can't give me the life I deserve, Ethan. You can't even see me." He folded the note carefully and placed it inside his pocket. Not out of heartbreak, but as evidence. Grace found him 2 days later in his workshop, hands tracing the edges of an unfinished model. "You should rest," she whispered. He shook his head. "Rest is for men who've accepted blindness. I haven't." Grace hesitated. "Ethan, you can't fight them. They're too powerful." He smiled faintly, eyes hidden behind black glasses. "Power is blind without foresight, Grace. I still have that." When Vanessa was 12, her father left her mother for a woman who owned a construction firm. Her mother told her through tears, "Love without money is a curse." Vanessa carried that like scripture. So when she met Richard Bennett, her husband's billionaire boss, she saw the life she'd always wanted. Not love, not safety. Just luxury, pure and cold. One evening, while news cameras showed Richard and Vanessa at a charity gala, Grace sat beside Ethan in the dark. "They're calling her the future Mrs. Bennett," she whispered. Ethan smiled, slow and haunting. "Then I'll make sure her future never arrives." The light from the TV flickered against his blind eyes. And for the first time since the fire, he looked alive. The rain came down hard that night, washing the Dallas skyline clean of its glitter. Inside the penthouse that once held laughter and champagne, Vanessa stood in front of the mirror again. Only this time, she wasn't the same woman Ethan had saved. She wore a diamond necklace Richard had given her, the kind of stone that screamed victory. Behind that reflection was the ghost of her husband's face, blind, calm, unreadable. It haunted her sometimes, his silence, his forgiveness. But she buried the thought every time Richard's hand slipped around her waist. Ethan, meanwhile, had vanished from her world. The last she heard, he'd moved out of the city, sold his shares, and disappeared. The tabloids said he couldn't handle the pressure. "Blind engineer quits industry after divorce." Richard laughed when he read it out loud. Vanessa smiled along, but something inside her flinched at the word blind. 3 months later, Bennett Tech was booming again. Vanessa, now Richard's public relations director and secret fiancée, stood beside him at press events, flashing her perfect smile to cameras that adored her. Everyone saw the glamorous power couple. No one saw the blood on their hands. But in a quiet part of town, Ethan Cole sat alone in a modest apartment. His fingers ran across blueprints, tracing every line of the defense project he'd created. Grace stood beside him, her voice steady. "The world thinks you've given up." "That's the point," Ethan replied softly. His voice had a steel edge she'd never heard before. "They can't fight what they don't see coming." He opened a laptop and pressed a key combination, each motion deliberate, memorized. Grace watched in disbelief as data appeared. Prototype files, patent transfers, Bennett Tech's encrypted accounts. You backed everything up?" "I built the system," he said. "Did they really think I'd let them steal it without a key?" Grace shook her head in quiet awe. "You planned this before the accident." "I didn't plan to lose my sight," Ethan said calmly, "but I planned for betrayal." That night, as rain tapped against the windows, Ethan began writing a new name into the database. C-Optic Systems, a new company, a rebirth, silent, invisible, and soon unstoppable. At the same hour, Vanessa clinked glasses with Richard in a rooftop lounge. "To new beginnings," she said. Richard smirked. "And to old mistakes that make them possible." Vanessa laughed, but when her phone buzzed, she frowned. An email had arrived from an anonymous sender. Subject: "You can't steal what doesn't belong to you." She blinked. No attachments, no signature. But deep inside, she felt something cold move through her chest. Richard noticed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said quickly, locking her phone. "Spam." But it wasn't. The message had been sent from a secure proxy server registered under a shell company, one that Ethan Cole had quietly built years before. 2 weeks later, Richard's legal team received a cease and desist letter. The patents Bennett Tech was using, The same ones Vanessa had signed to transfer were now under government review. Richard's lawyers panicked. Vanessa panicked even more. "He's blind, Richard. He can't possibly—" Richard slammed the desk. "Don't underestimate him. Ethan's the kind of man who fights in silence. That's the most dangerous kind." Across town, Grace walked into Ethan's new workspace. It was small but alive, machines humming, lights flickering, prototypes laid out like pieces of war. "You're really doing it," she said. Ethan turned toward her voice, a faint smile playing on his lips. "They took everything from me but my mind. Now I'll take back everything they built on my blood." Grace's chest tightened. She wanted to say more, but she saw it, the fire behind his calm exterior, the kind that didn't burn skin, but empires. Months passed. C-Optic Systems began leaking small innovations to the press. Breakthroughs in sensor technology, night vision, motion detection. Each leak included one cryptic tagline, "Created by the man who sees without eyes." Vanessa tried to ignore it, but she couldn't. The words followed her everywhere, on billboards and business journals, whispered in interviews. Every time she felt Ethan's voice in her head. Even without eyes, Richard grew paranoid. "He's taunting us," he said one night. "He's trying to ruin me." "Ruin us," Vanessa corrected sharply. "No," Richard said, pouring himself another drink. "You were just convenient. He's coming for me." But that wasn't true. Ethan was coming for both of them. It started with the boardroom scandal. One morning, an anonymous file leaked to the press, audio of Vanessa and Richard plotting to defraud investors. The internet exploded. The headlines screamed betrayal, corporate theft, moral decay. Richard fired half his PR team. Vanessa nearly fainted when she realized the recording had been captured months earlier, from her own phone. Grace stood behind Ethan that night, watching him listen to the audio through wireless earbuds. "You were recording her?" "She left her phone synced to our home Wi-Fi," Ethan said simply. "I just listened." "What are you going to do next?" "Justice," he said, his tone almost gentle. "One step at a time." The next step came quietly. Richard's mansion mortgage was mysteriously bought out by an unknown investor. A month later, foreclosure papers arrived. Vanessa screamed when the court officer delivered the notice. Richard threw the papers across the marble floor, shouting, "Who the hell owns this loan?" The name on the paperwork, C-Optic Holdings, LLC. That night, Vanessa sat alone by the pool, trembling. "He's blind," she whispered. "How does he do this?" Grace's voice echoed in Ethan's workshop. "You've hit them harder than anyone ever could." Ethan's hand paused on the model he was designing. "Not yet." As dawn broke, his phone vibrated with a notification. A video had just gone live, footage from a charity gala. Vanessa and Richard smiling, holding hands. The caption beneath it read, "The future Mrs. Bennett." Ethan closed his laptop slowly, his blind eyes fixed on nothing and everything at once. Then it's time to make sure her future ends exactly where it began. And for the first time, Grace saw it, the full weight of his plan. The quiet man who once built machines to help others see was now building a war to make them blind. When she asked him how far he was willing to go, he only said, "Until she finally understands what sight truly costs." Outside, the city lights blurred against the rain. Somewhere in a penthouse she used to share with him, Vanessa felt a chill she couldn't explain, like the gaze of a man who could see her even through darkness. And as thunder rolled through Dallas, Ethan Cole smiled faintly and whispered to himself, "Now the game begins." The morning Dallas woke to headlines screaming, "Benetech under federal investigation." Richard Bennett's empire began to crumble in slow motion. Cameras swarmed his driveway, reporters shouted questions, and Vanessa, dressed in designer silk, tried to smile through the chaos. But when one journalist shouted, "Mrs. Cole, any comment on the fraud accusations?" her throat locked. Inside his downtown workspace, Ethan Cole listened to every broadcast. His blind eyes stayed still, but his hand traced the edge of a steel prototype, like a man feeling his own pulse. Grace stood nearby, stunned at how calm he looked. "Phase 1's complete," he said. "You're dismantling a billion-dollar company with a laptop," she whispered. He smiled. "They built it on lies. Lies collapse when truth has teeth. That was the first of 10 moves. The second came 3 nights later. Vanessa arrived at an elite fundraiser wearing the same diamond Richard had given her after the divorce. The ballroom glittered with power, but halfway through her speech, a projector flickered. The screen behind her filled with emails. Her emails, detailing transfers from Bennett Tech's charity fund into private accounts in her name. Gasps cut through the hall. Richard's face turned the color of stone. She froze as the crowd turned their phones toward her, filming every second. By dawn, every major outlet had the footage. Ethan's anonymous signature, C-Optic Witness Program, appeared at the bottom of the leak. Richard confronted her in the mansion. "You made me a fool," he shouted. "I didn't. Ethan did this," she cried. "Ethan can't see a door in front of him," Richard sneered. "You were sloppy." She slammed the glass on the table. "He's not blind, Richard. Not where it counts." Meanwhile, Ethan's third move was unfolding quietly. A silent partner from Bennett Tech's finance department, bribed years ago by Richard, suddenly turned witness. Grace had found him, broken, scared, and ready to talk. The man gave Ethan everything: hidden accounts, fake invoices, even recordings of Richard boasting that the blind fool signed away his life. Ethan packaged the evidence and sent it to the Department of Justice with no return address. The fourth move cut deeper. Using shell companies, Ethan bought out the mortgage on Richard's mansion and filed foreclosure. The legal notice arrived during Vanessa's birthday brunch. Guests watched as a courier handed her the envelope. She read the first line and went pale. Richard snatched it, eyes widening when he saw the creditor's name, C-Optic Holdings LLC. C-Optic, he muttered. "That's him." Vanessa stared at the horizon. "He's everywhere." By week's end, the mansion was emptied. Cameras caught movers hauling out furniture as reporters screamed questions. Ethan watched it all from his apartment, sound turned low, hands folded. "4 down," he murmured. His fifth strike came through humiliation, not law. At the city's Innovation Gala, C-Optic unveiled a prototype using his original optical sensor. The audience erupted when the host introduced the founder, Ethan Cole. He walked on stage guided by Grace's hand, dark glasses glinting beneath the spotlight. "For some," he said into the microphone, "blindness begins when the eyes open and the soul closes." Every network aired the speech. Vanessa, watching from a cheap motel, dropped the remote and wept. Ethan wasn't done. Sixth, Richard's offshore accounts vanished overnight. A hacker collective, one Ethan had quietly funded, released data proving Richard laundered millions through false charities. The SEC froze everything. Seventh, Vanessa's luxury cars, jewelry, and penthouse were repossessed in auction. Ethan bought them anonymously and donated them to a foundation for the blind. When the press thanked Vanessa Cole for her generosity, her humiliation went global. Eighth, Richard tried to sue. In court, Ethan's lawyers produced hidden camera footage from the Bennett Tech lab, Richard forging Ethan's signature while Vanessa stood beside him. The courtroom fell silent. The judge dismissed the case and opened a criminal inquiry. Ninth, the betrayal within betrayal. Richard's son, Caleb, leaked photos of himself and Vanessa in a hotel suite, furious that she'd chosen his father over him years earlier. The tabloids devoured it. Headlines screamed Richard Bennett's fiancée in affair with his son. Richard collapsed from stress the next day. His empire finished. The 10th strike came months later, slow and surgical. C-Optic went public, its stock tripling overnight. Ethan's face appeared on every news outlet, hailed as a visionary. During an interview, the reporter asked softly, "What inspired this comeback?" Ethan smiled. "Pain has a way of teaching vision." That same week, Vanessa, now penniless and alone, worked as a hostess at a downtown cafe. She kept her head down, praying no one recognized her. When the doorbell chimed, she looked up. A man stood there, cane in hand, dark glasses reflecting the afternoon light. Her lips parted. "Ethan?" He stepped closer, his voice calm. "Now I can finally see what blindness saved me from." He left before she could speak. She sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands as the cafe noise drowned around her. Outside, Grace waited by the car. Ethan touched the roof lightly. "It's over," she said. He shook his head. "No, it's beginning." "Beginning? Justice isn't revenge, Grace. It's remembering." He turned his face toward the sun, eyes closed, breathing deep. "And I'll remember every sound of what they destroyed, so no one else has to lose their sight to see the truth." Morning sunlight spilled across downtown Dallas like forgiveness that hadn't yet chosen its target. A full year had passed since the fire that took Ethan Cole's sight and the world that betrayed him. In that time, Benetech had collapsed. Richard Bennett had been sentenced to 8 years for fraud, and every magazine now hailed C-Optic Systems as the company that rose from ashes. The man who once couldn't see a single thing now stood as the symbol of vision itself. But inside, Ethan wasn't celebrating. Success hadn't made him whole. It had only quieted the noise long enough for memory to speak again. Grace found him on the balcony that morning, standing still, listening to the city hum. "They called," she said softly. "The board wants you in Washington next week for the contract signing." He nodded without turning. "I'll be there." She hesitated, then added, "There's something else. Someone asked for you at the lobby downstairs. She said she's from a charity for rehabilitation." Ethan tilted his head, recognizing the tremor in her voice. "It's her." Grace's silence confirmed it. Vanessa Cole stood in the lobby wearing a plain dress, hair tied back, eyes hollow. She held a small box in her hands like it contained her entire life. When Ethan approached, guided by his cane, the room fell silent. People whispered, some out of pity, some out of disbelief. "Ethan," she said quietly, voice cracking, "I needed to see you." He didn't respond at first. His blank lenses reflected her trembling form. "You've already seen everything you wanted, Vanessa." Tears filled her eyes. "I came to give you this." She opened the box. Inside lay his old wedding ring, still shining, untouched by time. "I kept it. I don't even know why. I thought maybe—" "Maybe what?" he asked, his tone neither cruel nor kind. "Maybe forgiveness still exists." Ethan stepped closer, his presence calm but unshakable. "Forgiveness isn't blindness. I learned that the hard way." She wiped her tears. "I was wrong, Ethan. I thought love without money was weakness. I thought power made people safe. But I was wrong about everything. I destroyed the only man who ever saw me for who I was." His jaw tightened. "You destroyed yourself. I just let you see it happen." She sank to her knees, clutching the box. "Then end it. Hate me. I deserve it." He bent slightly, his voice a whisper that somehow carried through the entire lobby. "I don't hate you, Vanessa. You're my greatest teacher." Her eyes widened. "Teacher?" He nodded slowly. "You taught me that sight isn't about eyes. It's about truth. You taught me that love without loyalty is blindness. And you taught me that sometimes mercy is letting someone live with what they've done." He placed the box gently in her hands and stepped back. "Keep it, a reminder of what you traded." She sobbed as he turned away, but he didn't look back. Not because he couldn't, but because he finally chose not to. Outside, the wind was sharp, cleansing. Grace met him at the car, eyes wet. "You forgave her?" "No," he said quietly. "I released her. There's a difference." They drove away in silence. Dallas stretched around them, streets Ethan once walked blind now alive with light and sound. Later that week, the Washington contract ceremony filled the news. Cameras flashed as Ethan Cole took the podium. "When I lost my sight," he told the crowd, "I thought my life was over. But sometimes life removes what blinds us to show what matters. I stand here not because I see the world clearer than anyone, but because I finally learned to listen to it." Applause rolled like thunder. Grace, standing nearby, watched the man she'd once pitied become something larger than revenge, something luminous. That night they returned to Dallas. The city lights shimmered across the glass walls of C-Optic's headquarters. Grace poured 2 glasses of wine and whispered, "You finally won." Ethan smiled faintly. "No, I just stopped losing." They stood in silence, the sound of rain beginning outside, the same rhythm that had once echoed the night his world burned. He lifted his face toward it, letting the drops hit his skin. Somewhere across town, in a small rented room above a diner, Vanessa watched the news broadcast on an old television. Ethan's face filled the screen, calm and strong. She smiled through tears and whispered, "You were right, Ethan. You always were." The image flickered, the applause fading into static. She turned off the TV, held the ring to her chest, and sat quietly in the dark. Ethan and Grace stepped out onto the balcony together. The city lights blurred through the rain, and for the first time his blindness felt like peace. "You think people change, Grace?" he asked. She looked at him softly. "Only when they finally see what love costs." He smiled, a real one, small but alive. "Then maybe I've finally seen enough." The camera of imagination would rise slowly. The blind man standing in the glow of the city he rebuilt. The woman who betrayed him fading into the shadows of memory, and the rain washing everything clean. And over that final image, Ethan's voice would linger, low, steady, and human. Some people lose their sight and find their vision. Others keep their eyes open and stay blind forever.